recording.
Awesome. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us for this webinar today. We have another in the series of webinars between We Connect International in South Africa and Procter & Gamble South Africa. We've now had as many as 6 webinars, and today we have Mikal Chitanand, who is joining us from Procter & Gamble. He's a media purchasing manager. So he's going to be sharing some great insights with us on brand purchases. Just a little bit on housekeeping, please. We'd appreciate it if everybody goes on mute. I can see a few people who don't have themselves on mute, so we don't pick up the background noises. And if you have any questions as Mikal is presenting, please put your questions in the chat box, which is on your screen. We'd really appreciate that. And we've got a few stops in the middle of the presentations where we'll actually read out your questions. The session will take exactly an hour, and I know it's going to be extremely insightful. Mikal's been working with us through the whole project with Procter & Gamble, where we've had webinars, we've had coaching, and we've had training as well. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Mikal, to introduce yourself, please, to the group, and then go straight into your presentation. I'm going to go on mute.
Thanks, Jean, and thanks for the opportunity to talk about this area that I really enjoy in P&G, which is brand building purchases. So, hi everyone, I'm Mikal. I'm currently the media purchasing manager at P&G. I have been since March this year, which is quite recent. Prior to this, my role in P&G has been on non-media marketing, so it's below the line, focusing on in-store marketing materials, merchandising, point-of-sale material, and direct-to-consumer activation. So I have quite some experience in the brand building, media, and non-media purchasing space, and I hope I can take this or share some of that with you today. So just to touch on quickly how I'm going to be going through this, and I will be switching my video off as I start because I might have some bandwidth issues. So I want to just give some clarity that this wouldn't be a branding session, so to say. It's more going to be a purchasing session, but focusing on brand building and how purchases actually is an important factor in that. So I want to give you some perspective of what it's like being in the brand building purchases position, how it looks to some of you who may be future suppliers and who probably have clients that you liaise with in the same position. And I also want to have it in a bit of a generalized way so that you can take some of the learnings and apply to your own interactions between you and your suppliers or sub-suppliers you may have. So with that, I'm just going to be switching off my video and I will begin. So the first thing I want to touch on is, what is brand building to you? And this isn't a question that requires any input. It's just something for you to internalize and think about in your interactions with your clients or customers or with your sub-suppliers when you want to market yourself. What does brand building mean to you and your company or your customers and clients' companies? A very generalized definition or loosely thrown around definition is brand building is the process of creating awareness of a product or services through advertising or through sponsoring it or through endorsements. To follow on with that, it's to look at why is brand building important. And there's actually 2 reasons as to why brand building is important. One, you're driving penetration into new target markets which you may not have reached yet, and that's important to gain new customers. And 2, it's really important for retention and keeping that loyalty with your customers. We see that retaining customers is sometimes much harder than acquiring new ones. And it all starts with that first impression, that how you come across as your brand or how you actually position yourself and what kind of awareness and service you actually drive through your marketing and messaging. So With that, I'm going to touch on four topics. One will be KPIs and scorecards. The next will be end-to-end value and accountability to actually show where purchasing sits in this end-to-end value chain and why there's so much accountability on purchasing. The third will be understanding and minimize wastage. It could be in your marketing, in your inner workings, in your discussions, in your timelines, by understanding that wastage and how do you minimize it. And the last one would be on how to grow with your customer, with your suppliers, and with all of you being in the We Connect network, how can you possibly reach out, partner, and grow with each other? So the first thing I want to talk about is KPIs and scorecards. And I have been on some of these We Connect trainings, coaching sessions, and webinars like Jean mentioned. And one of the common questions I've seen come up is, how do I know what I'm measured against with my customer? How do I know what to measure my supplier against? And I just want to say that there's no one size fits all for knowing what KPIs to use or to be measured against or what your scorecard should look like. I just want to touch on three very generalized KPIs that are very critical to the brand building purchases space. So I'm putting three KPIs up on the screen. That's quality, cost, and meeting timelines. And I just want you to take a few seconds to internalize it and understand which of them are important and which of them you generally look at improving when liaising with your customers and your internal suppliers. And I tell you that all three of them are equally as important. And to actually show how all three of them are equally important, I want to try taking one of them out of the equation on a very generalized example. So the example I want you to think of is I want to do in-store marketing with brand ambassadors and I need to purchase branded t-shirts for these brand ambassadors. So I want to show how the three KPIs, quality, cost, and meeting timelines actually impact how that objective of in-store execution or in-store brand ambassadors and how do we actually execute that or tie that into the execution process. So first, I want to just take away the meeting timelines aspect of it. So in the situation, I would have had the process set up to do in-store branding, and we can take a brand like Always, for example. So I would have brand ambassadors ready to go in-store to market Always in the various retailers. And the final step would be getting these Always branded t-shirts to them so that when the consumers in store come across them, they know that they're producing or promoting Always. If I take away the meeting timelines KPI from this, I'm left with a great quality product that comes within my budget, but it's of no use to me because I don't have it in time to give to these brand ambassadors to actually execute what needs to be done. So meeting timelines is extremely critical for the overall objective and execution of whatever activity it is. And it could be in that situation that having that branded t-shirt is so critical that the entire execution or activation may not even go ahead because of that being missed. So I just wanted to highlight how important meeting timelines is as a KPI. The next one is to look at the cost aspect. So if these t-shirts or a product doesn't come within my budget or I don't have enough budget for it, what are the implications of that and how should it affect the KPIs that I look at? Well, if it doesn't come within the right budget or at not the right cost, I have a great quality product that's delivered on time but can't use because I can't afford to pay for it. So I'll come to cost again at the end, but cost is a very, very vital KPI when looking at purchases, but brand building purchases specifically, because this is around marketing. And if you don't have the budget for it, then it cannot go ahead. And lastly, to look at the quality aspect. If I take out quality from these three KPIs, what does that look like? Well, in this example, if the t-shirts I received were poor quality or weren't the right always colors or it was faded or torn or anything like that, it reflects what the brand image is. Quality, I'd say, is one of the most critical KPIs of the three because it's so much outward facing. Um, Cost and meeting timelines are more internal KPIs, but quality reflects to the outside what the product or what the image of the brand looks like. So you can imagine what it would be like to go to a Clicks or a Discam and see and have a brand ambassador come to talk to you about always, but the t-shirt they're wearing is really faded and maybe torn up or not the right colors, and it doesn't give you a very good image of the brand. So if the quality isn't up to standard, having it on time and within the budget doesn't matter. So before moving on, I just want to come back to that cost aspect because there's a very generalized perception that people in a purchasing position or in that purchasing or procurement role, the only thing they need to do is cut costs and get the best costs and get the cheapest cost. And these were questions that also came up through previous webinars and trainings that what do I do if um, I can't offer a product at the best cost? What do I do if my competitors are undercutting me? Um, I just want to clear up that, and hopefully from these previous examples, it explains that cost isn't the only driving factor behind this. If I had to ask someone to get me a car, and in my mind, I was thinking they're going to get me a BMW or a very high-end luxurious car, but I didn't give them enough money for that, and they come back with something that's not as luxurious or high-end as a BMW. And it's as simple as you pay for what you get. So while yes, cost is a very important factor, there is an understanding that you do pay for what you get. To get better quality, you do have to sacrifice a little bit of cost. Um, if you are being very tight on costs and cutting down costs continuously, then you're not really allowing the supplier to perform as best as they could, to get the best material, to get the best ink for printing, to get the best recordings done for media content. So cost isn't the only driving factor, and I'm not sure how many of you liaise with your clients or customers and worry that when it comes to cost that they're going to turn you down because you're higher priced than your competitors, or you know that there are cheaper service offerings. And to that, I'd say you need to brand if you know that you are at a higher cost than your competitors or than other people in the market, and there's a valid reason for that. You need to brand your service offering or your product as a premium service offering or premium product. Allow the person on the other end to understand that yes, you are paying more, but you are paying more for much better quality. Um, People don't go to a BMW dealership and complain that a BMW costs X amount, but a Toyota costs 300,000 Rand less. It's an understanding that for premium product, a premium car, a luxurious car, you're going to pay a premium price for it. So with that, I want to go to end-to-end value and accountability, which shows where purchasing sits in this entire value chain. And I've generalized this value chain to show what it looks like from supplier to customer. In this example, purchasing as PNG would be myself, and customers would be the retailers, and suppliers would be any of you possibly. So from the supplier to the internal stakeholder teams would be the brand teams and marketing teams to sign off what branding or marketing they want. It would be then the purchasing responsibility to manage that to the external facing teams and to the customer teams. And why I wanted to touch on this is to show that quality and cost do tie in because purchasing sits in the middle, and that accountability of getting the good quality, the best quality at the right cost does sit with purchasing. If there's poor quality that goes to the customer at the end of the line, which is a clicks or a discount, and it's poor quality, they aren't going to come back to P&G's supplier to say, why was this poor quality? It comes back to the external facing team, which would be our customer teams, to say P&G provided the poor quality. And that comes back to P&G as a whole. So the accountability does sit with the middle person. And in this case, the accountability does sit with purchasing to drive best quality to the end of the line. Similarly, with timelines, if the product or the marketing material doesn't get to the customer on time, the accountability does still sit with purchasing and with P&G. And I want to change that slightly to maybe make it easier for you to put yourself in those shoes. Um, if you are servicing a client and have a sub vendor, and say it's for branded t-shirts, for example, if your sub vendor gives you a poor quality branded t-shirt, which you then give to your client or your customer doesn't come back to your sub vendor to say, why was this poor quality? That accountability sits with you because you're in the middle of that value chain. And this is why cost isn't the only factor to be looked at when you're in the middle of that value chain. Quality timelines play a very, very vital role in that as well. And that's because you kind of have to, in that middle position, you have to push it along, get it to the end of the line, get it to the customer as you would want to get it as well. And before we move on, we touched on two of the four topics, which was KPIs and scorecards and end-to-end value and accountability. And I just want to stop for a few minutes to see if there's any questions.
Thanks, Mikal. That was great. I just want to introduce Palissa, who's going to be handling some of your questions. Palissa, you there? If you just introduce yourself and then speak to Mikal about the questions so far. Please, can I ask anyone who has questions, please type it in the chat box.
Hear me?
We
Yes,
can,
go ahead.
Anyone
It's a
hear me?
little bit wobbly, but go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, like Jean said, I'm Palesa and I'll be helping Mikal. Question is, how do you measure quality? Is this covered in the order?
So quality is one of the most abstract KPIs to measure. It's something you can't quantify. You can't put a number next to it. With timelines, it's very easy to have it at a date or align on a date beforehand. If you miss the date, then it's obviously missed. Cost as well, it's with numbers, it's very easy. Quality is very subjective, and this is something that needs to be aligned um, at the start when costs are discussed. When the order is placed, it has to be aligned at the start with the person who's requesting it. So not necessarily the purchasing person, but maybe it's the brand and marketing team who say that for this to be classified as good quality, maybe they specify what Pantone color of bloom it needs to be. It needs to have no rugged edges and it needs to not be pixelated and things like that. I think it's very hard to describe what good quality is, but it's very easy to identify what bad quality is. Where if you look at a billboard and the person's face on the billboard is all distorted, it's very easy to point that out as bad quality. But if it wasn't, it's very hard to quantify how that's good quality. My advice on that would be align beforehand. How do I know this is a good quality piece of work, or how are you going to measure the quality of this?
Um, Second question, do you give feedback to suppliers if they lose a order because of cost?
Yes, so this we will come to in the fourth piece of understanding and growing with your supplier and customer. So if we can just hold this till maybe the second round of questions at the end, because this will be covered slightly later on.
I think
Those
those
would
are the
be it.
questions for now.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mikal, just if you can continue.
Great. I will continue forward then. So the next point I wanted to touch on is understanding and minimizing wastage. Um, I think on this we need to understand what wastage is, and wastage can be a variety of things. If your marketing wastage could be reaching the wrong target audience or reaching 1 million people when you know only 1,000 do have an intent to purchase your product or service. It could be processes in your internal workings or your supply chain that are redundant or could be automated or just unnecessary. Or it could be lost time in the timeline process, in the CPS. Um, Maybe certain processes taking 3 days when it should be done in one. Wastage can be a number of things. And to understand wastage and to understand where those gaps are in your inner workings, it can be unraveled by one word. That's why. So I want to touch on three different ways of identifying wastage, exposing those gaps, unraveling those gaps, and how do we actually understand that this is wastage. The first one is the 5 why principle. Um, I have an engineering background, so I'm very familiar with this from a production standpoint, where a product is produced that has a defect or could have some problem. It's a very simple process to continuously ask why and understand the root cause of that. The second one is value stream mapping, which is a logistics process and generally associated with supply chain and warehousing, but it's also very relevant to the internal workings of your business and identifying losses in the internal workings of your business. And the third one is with regards to target market, choosing to market to the correct target market. So the first one I want to touch on is the 5 why principle. And this is basically seeing an error or seeing a fault and continuously asking why did this fault occur and doing that until you get to the root cause. It's called 5 why process because it generally takes 5 whys to uh, get to the root cause, but you can just call it the why process if you don't want to tie yourself down to 5. Um, and I would say from experience, this process, doing this process while working in a team does infuriate a lot of people. You can imagine messing up something or something goes wrong and then you have someone come and ask you why 5 times. It does get quite infuriating, but I think working in a team and explaining this process and getting everyone on board to actually follow this process and understand why things go wrong does help move things along a lot better. So I'm going to use a very generic example of running through a red traffic light and finding out why and getting to the root cause of that. So the problem is running through a red traffic light, and you question yourself and ask yourself, why did I run through a red traffic light? And the reason is I woke up late for work. And why did I wake up late? Or I was late for work, and say, why were you late? And the reason could be, I woke up late. And why did you wake up late? And because the alarm clock broke. And as you go through this why chain, you start getting a direction of where the root cause is. So already by the third why, you have a sense of the reason for this fault is the alarm clock. So if you keep on asking why, it could be the next one would be you didn't check if it worked, and why didn't you check if it worked? And it's because you forgot to last night. And again, you don't have to tie yourself to 5 whys. You can continuously go on for as long as you need. And it could be, why did you forget to last night? And you were working late, or you came back from the gym late, and continuously ask why and why to get further down. But once you have a direction of where the problem is and where the root cause is, it gives you a sense of what needs to be fixed. So in this example, by the time you get to the third why, that the alarm clock broke, you kind of have an idea of what you need to do. Buy a new alarm clock and maybe set a second alarm on your phone. It's a very simple process, and this is a very simple example explaining it. But once you take it back to your inner workings of your company, your supply chain, if you're producing materials or producing products to your production lines, anything like that, and apply this 5 why principle, you start understanding that there has been some wastage along the lines, things that you haven't picked up. An easy way to do it is to, if you are producing something and it takes you 7 days to have it from material to final product, to understand why can't I do it in 5? And then it could be because a certain process takes 3 days, and you ask, why does it take 3 days? And you go along that line of understanding does why are certain things certain ways, and by understanding that, the things that you don't have an answer for or seem redundant can be cancelled out, because that's wastage. So I want to look at a more brand building example, which would be a billboard, and I will come to this billboard again slightly later on. But say, for example, we want to put a billboard in an area, and with the outlook that in 2 months it's going to create or increase sales by 10%. And after 2 months' time, we come and look at that area, and it didn't increase sales by 10%. So we come back to try and find out what the root cause of that was. And you say, well, why didn't it increase sales? Well, that could be because not enough people saw it, so it didn't drive enough penetration into the market. Well, why didn't enough people see it? And that could be because it's in an area with low volume of traffic or very little traffic. And why was it in that area? Well, that could be because it was cheaper to put a billboard in that area, and we didn't have budget for anything else. And by getting to that, you sort of realize now that the problem you may have here is around the budget, that maybe increase the budget so you can put the billboard in a area with more traffic and you can reach people in that way. So again, it's a very simple outlook of how the why process is actually applied, but it does get very detailed and very in-depth at times. But it's an extremely useful tool to take back, to look at the inner workings of your company, to look at your supply chain, your production lines, to understand why things go a certain way and cancel out that wastage. The second one that I want to touch on is value stream mapping. And like I said, value stream mapping is a very logistical process. The picture on the screen is just a illustration of what a VSM looks like and has nothing to do with an actual example. But it's ideally understanding from the time raw material enters your plant or factory or area of work, every process along the way that takes it to become a finished product, understanding that process, walking that process with your entire team, looking for ways to optimize each of those processes, and then cutting out redundant activities, cutting out unnecessary activities, maybe saving on costs. Value stream mapping is an extremely useful process to save on costs and maybe even improving the efficiencies and timelines. All of this can be taken from a supply chain, logistics, and warehousing use and applied to an entire business. It can be applied to brand building, it could be applied to marketing, to understand from the time we develop a brief of marketing or brand building activity to the time it reaches the consumer. Along that, every process along the way, understanding where can we save on costs, understanding where can we improve timelines, understanding what opportunities are there for our supplier to improve, how can we help them improve, um, become more efficient, become better or more specialized in a certain activity. Value stream mapping, just like the why process, it's an extremely tedious process to follow if you want to map out an entire business plan or an entire function of a business, depending on the size of your business. And it works best when all the different stakeholders are in the room. Um, you get an understanding and an input from someone who's a supply chain expert on what opportunities there may be in supply chain. And there could be opportunities in logistics, but you have a sales guy come in and say that that's not going to tie into the sales strategy. So having all the stakeholders improves and fleshes out the process a lot more and helps you get to a broader understanding of what needs to be done to improve efficiencies, to cut out wastage. And the last one that I want to touch on is target audiences. Um, in the marketing space and brand building space, the biggest wastage is reaching the wrong target audience. So the illustration on screen shows the audience you reach to drive awareness and how big that is. But as you come down the chain, the audience that your brand building or marketing activity actually piques the interest of is much less than the one that you drove awareness with. And then from that, how many of them or how much of them actually have a consideration to purchase your product or purchase your service? And then from there, how much of them have that intent to go and purchase and actually drive to the purchasing activity? And lastly, like I said at the beginning, retention is really important. How many of those customers do you actually retain at the end of the day? So just by looking at this almost pyramid example, the amount of people you drive awareness with and the amount of people that actually purchase your product is vastly different. And everything in between or that separates those two in terms of numbers can be considered wastage. If you are raising awareness with 1 million people, but 15,000 actually purchase your product, then you have 985,000 people that you're wasting marketing on. So to avoid that, it's and the best way to understand where wastage is with marketing and brand building is to understand your audience, understand who it is you're targeting. If you are selling car insurance, targeting or cold calling someone who's a 16-year-old person isn't the right target market because they don't even have a car yet. If you offering a construction or civil engineering service, trying to market that to someone who owns a bakery isn't really going to get you much return. So understanding what your service offering is and who the actual target market is immediately cuts away a lot of the wastage in this process. To cut down the wastage even more is to understand what platform you want to reach your target audience in. If it's, for example, you want to reach a adolescent boy or man or young man on shaving, what platform does he use most often? Or what areas is it most often? Would it be a high school? Would it be a gym? Would it be social media? Understanding which platform or what area to market in to reach your target audience is also cuts out a lot of wastage. I I think one really good example of this is in a lot of areas that have, or in a lot of areas where Virgin Active, the gym chain, has marketed, you would find them in malls near a Discount or a Clicks or a sports supplement shop because ideally people in, or majority of the people going into those type of shops sometimes do look at sports supplements, which gives the indication that they may be inclined to go to the gym as well. So that's a way of understanding who your target audience is and using the right channel to target them. So what I want to move on to now is growing with your customer or your supplier. And this is actually coming back to the question that was asked, or this will answer the question that was asked with regards to feedback around cost. So there's four ways that you can actually do this. First one would be just to go back to the brief. To if you're a supplier and you maybe pitch for or send through a proposal for a piece of work and it gets rejected, for you to understand why that rejection actually happened. So to go back to the brief to say what I delivered and what was briefed in, what difference was there? And need to understand that. Sorry, I think someone's not on mute. If you could please mute yourself to cancel out that background sound. Thanks. So, like I said, going back to the brief, go back to the person you were dealing with, the purchasing person, the requester, say, this is what you briefed in, and this is what I delivered or proposed. Help me understand what I can do to improve that. And in most cases, unless it's an extremely busy time, like the end of a financial year, the person on the other end is going to give you feedback. And I would say in my role that where I've been on that other end of viewing many business proposals and pitches, one of the main reasons we reject them is that the brief isn't answered 100%. We see that we ask for a certain activity to be proposed, and in the proposal, it's very nice, it's colorful, it's really stunning proposal and brings it to life and things like that. But when you try looking at the mechanics to say if someone comes and says they give you a really good proposal, and I'll go back to the previous example, the initial example of always in-store brand ambassadors, and they give you this really amazing proposal to say they can reach 1 million people in a week and looks nice. They've got good animations and graphics and things. And when you get to the mechanics behind it and the logistics behind it to say, how are you going to do that? How many stores are you going to go to? How many brand ambassadors are you going to go to? That's generally where it falls short. The marketing of it is amazing, but the actual mechanics behind the proposal is what's missing. The logistics behind the proposal isn't there to help me understand how this activity gets done. And that's just one of the main reasons some proposals get rejected, and this feedback is given to suppliers when we do reject it. The second one kind of ties into the first one to say, understand your no. If you are rejected for a proposal, to understand why you're rejected. To go back to the customer or the client to say, I answered the brief to 100% and help me understand why I wasn't picked up. And it could be as simple as someone just had a better service offering. And in the purchasing or requesting space, it's hard to explain why someone had a better service offering while trying to keep their service offering confidential. But it's possible to explain to the supplier that got rejected, how can you improve? What can you do to better it? What can you do to make me consider you for the next time? And again, that ties into the question that was asked with, if it's a reasoning for cost, we can't really say that your cost was 20% more, or we can't give you a value. All we can say is that you were a bit more expensive, so we had to go with someone cheaper. And again, that's to protect the person who actually got the job and to protect their costing structures or their confidential information that they're sharing with us through the proposal. But understanding that no and taking it back and actually growing with it, it's something that everyone can do. And even to come back to say that if it's for a always in-store brand ambassador activation and you don't get it and you go back to PNG and you ask, why didn't I get it? And or why was I turned down? And you understand that. And it may cost nothing for you to rework a proposal or restructure something or rethink something and go back a month later or a week later to say, or maybe even 2 months later to say, I reworked it into this. I know the activity is going on and I didn't get it, but if I had done it in this way, would I have been in a better place to be considered? And feedback is given at times like that. So understanding that no and understanding where you can grow ties into the third point of identifying growth opportunities. If it's a case of maybe you were doing marketing material for a billboard and your designs weren't really good because you outsourced design, that feedback will be given that your design wasn't really that good, and that could be a very good feedback for you to take and say, maybe I need to spend a little bit more and bring a designer in-house if this is a recurring activity I'm giving to a supplier. And that's another point that I wanted to touch on, but didn't include it as a main bullet point here, that understanding the frequency of the offering that you're giving. If it's a once-off proposal that you're sending through because it came your way, then it may not be worth your while to understand what you can do more to improve in that area if that's not your specialty. Um, we see that many businesses try to be a one-stop shop for everything, and unfortunately, especially in the brand building space, it's not possible to be a one-stop shop, to offer everything. And maybe it's a case of you understand where your focus is and understand what niche you want to play in and develop your expertise in that to the point where you have the expertise, you become a known person in the industry for that expertise instead of trying to reach all areas of in-store marketing material, customer activations, merchandising, all of that, where you touch in a little bit. And when you get feedback to say that maybe get a designer, maybe purchase a printer, it becomes very spread out. And instead of focusing on one design, maybe, and just focusing on that, spending your money and your focus and your time and energy on getting a designer, building a professional design team, offering professional design services. So the last one I want to touch on is joint business plans and partnerships. And so I'm just going to go forward 2 slides to touch on partnerships. So I've put this billboard here to show how partnerships are effective. On the left side of the billboard, you see Vodafone, and on the right side, it's Ariel. This was an ad done for Egypt and Morocco, so North Africa, PNG markets. It was a collaborative approach between Ariel and Vodafone, and I think in 2018 it was really well documented. And to try and increase or grow penetration in both markets, to say that Vodafone wasn't really reaching as many customers as it could, and Ariel wasn't reaching as many customers as it could as well. So Ariel and Vodafone had a joint business partnership where if you buy if you buy Vodafone airtime, you get a percentage of that airtime as a discount on your next Ariel purchase. And if you buy Ariel, you get a percentage of the cost of that Ariel product off your next airtime purchase with Vodafone. So in that way, it was incentive to buy both brands. And that's just a good example on how a joint business plan and a joint business partnership works. And in cases like that, it benefits both parties. It's a case of you lack in a certain area and I lack in a different area, but maybe we complement each other. And in the position that you're in now, with access to a We Connect network full of other women-owned businesses, it's a great opportunity to reach out to other businesses to say that I offer service A, but lack in service B. If we collaborate, then we can have a complete service offering that we can offer to a client. And that's how joint business plans are developed. And just to touch on a few steps of the joint business plan, it's the first one would be to develop that foundation, setting the goals and understanding the strategy behind it to say, where do you lack? Where do I lack? What goals do we have? And where do those goals overlap? And let's focus on both those goals together. And then discovering and aligning on different business strategies, planning initiatives like the Aerial and Vodafone initiative, and that had a really good slogan of talk and wash or wash and talk. Executing a plan like that, that's joint. Maybe it could be together going to customers to offer your service offering, to promote it on LinkedIn and things like that, and then to review and monitor that progress to say that yes, it has worked for a while, but maybe the longevity of this has actually died out. Maybe we started off really well and now we're very stable enough to split and work separately. So joint business plans are a very good idea if you know you're lacking in a certain area and you know someone else is lacking in a different area where you can complement each other. But it's not really for everyone. And maybe a joint business plan isn't the way to go. Maybe just a partnership like the Vodafone and Aerial partnership can be something you can collaborate on with your peers in the We Connect network. So with that, I end the presentation and we will touch on questions that have come through. So again, before that, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to you about brand building purchases. It's an area that I really enjoy and I'm really grateful for this time.
So one of the questions is, 5 why? Because obviously has a definition of varied outputs.
Sorry, Palesa, you were breaking up there. I didn't really get what you were saying.
Hi, Mikal. Let me try. I've got banging where I am.
I think maybe let's let Jean ask the question. She might be a bit clearer.
Hi. Okay, there's a number of questions. Let me just read them all to you because it's pretty noisy where I am as well. So the first one was, can you apply the why to costing? That was the 5 whys you did. Often it's out of the supplier's hands. Price is a combination of varied inputs. That was the first one. The next one is, what if P&G meets a supplier with a great product, but they don't meet your KPIs? Do you help to develop the suppliers, and what would the criteria be for you to take that decision? And then there's 2 more in the chat as well. Let me just scroll down for those. Besides lots of thank yous. Right. Do you think it makes sense to focus on one commodity? If you are a monopoly, how do I work on my brand? If I want to get multiple streams of income and position my company as a group of companies, as one of them, and I think there was another one. Says this is very generous and collaborative approach. It is encouraging that PNG support this, which is great. And the other one is, does PNG have a set of criteria that is readily available to potential suppliers to enable them to prepare better for becoming a supplier to PNG? So I'm going to go on mute and leave you to handle those. I can repeat any of them you want me to.
Great. I just took a few notes on them down, and I think I'll start with them in the opposite direction. So the first one with, does PNG have a set of criteria? No, there isn't any outlined set of criteria that we can actually share. Like I said, it's not a one size fit all kind of thing. It would vary quite a lot from activity to activity. The criteria for someone who offers a merchandising service is extremely different to someone who offers a media and content forming service. So there's no set criteria that can be offered. And I think just going into the next one, which would be focusing on one commodity, but wanting multiple streams of income and having a group of businesses. I would say in that position, it would be quite tough to understand exactly what your main commodity is. I understand the need to position it as a group of businesses, and it would be to look at maybe increasing your staff count. At the end of the day, one person, two people, three people, it's all have 24 hours, and it could be hard to manage and develop expertise in a group of businesses. But increasing the staff count, maybe if one of them is a design business, hiring a professional designer. If one of them is an engineering business, hiring someone with a lot of engineering experience to actually have people in those teams which can lead the development of expertise in those various businesses. In that way, you can develop each of them as separate teams that are well developed and have a wealth of expertise in them, and still come off as a company that has a host of businesses or a group of businesses. And the next one that touches on having a great product but not meeting the KPIs, I'm not sure I would actually understand this one 100% because if you have well, I'll try to answer it in the best of my ability, but if you have a good product and approach PNG and don't think you meet the KPIs, the KPIs wouldn't really be the main deciding factor if it's not a business need. If there's a business need for the particular product or service that you're offering, then PNG will definitely listen to it. If you don't happen to meet the KPIs, feedback will be given. But unfortunately, if it's something that there isn't a business need for example, I'll say construction, the PNG isn't really in constructing, then it's very hard for anyone in PNG to actually give you feedback on that because no one's really in that field. And then on the last one, which is applying the why principle to costing. Yes, it can definitely be applied to costing. It ties back into understanding your no. If you get rejected for something or get told no and don't have a proposal to go through or don't have or have a proposal that's rejected, then it's part of the process would be to come back to your internal team to understand why. And if that why is the costing, then to understand why the costing was off. For example, if you do t-shirts at 200 Rand and the market average is 100, to understand why through that value chain is it 200? Is it your suppliers putting a very big markup on it? Is there a desperate demand for cotton, so the cotton prices are going up? Do you have a printer that's maybe costing too much to print? So applying the 5 why principle to costing definitely works out. And I think another thing to consider there is having circles of influence and knowing which circles of influence you can touch on. So generally, you understand your circle of influence and you understand what you can influence in that circle. Um, there could be certain factors outside of that circle which you can't influence, which unfortunately you do have to accept. For example, if you're doing packaging and if there's a very big demand of oil and the oil prices go up, then that's completely outside of your circle of influence. So that's not something you can change, and it's something that you have to work with. But if you're doing packaging and your supplier shoots up his prices with no background or no context, that is in your circle of influence, you can then go to another supplier to find out or do benchmarking to find out what's the industry cost to maybe look at someone else, maybe change the material used for products. I hope I answered that question well enough.
That's great, Mikal. We've got about a minute left. Do you have time to carry on with a few more questions?
Yes, I do.
You do? Okay, great. I'm just going to do the close for the recording, so don't be put off. My name is Jean Chawapiwa. I'm the Country Director for We Connect International. This has been another webinar in the PNG South Africa and We Connect International in South Africa series of webinars. We still have 4 more webinars to go before the end of June, which will include international and regional trade, leadership, legal, and access to capital. We have amazing presenters who will be very informative. So please make sure you look out for those adverts and join us for those. And Mikal and Palisa, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate the time you've put into this, the preparation of the slides and everything else you've done to help us with this program. So I'm going to go back now to the questions, just to let everyone know that we will share the slides that Mikal has shared on this presentation, as well as the recording of the presentation. So I'm going to start from the bottom, Mikal, see if I can catch up with what's on the chat. How do you go about understanding that circle of influence just by slowly figuring out over time, or is it there's a way to fast track, at least at PNG? There's a lot of thank yous that are coming through. Thank you, Mikal. There were also a few questions about how do people become suppliers to PNG. There's another comment about Mikal assisted me from RFQ to delivery. So PNG really do walk the talk when assisting us through the process. We had to submit a sample and was then successfully selected in assisting through the journey. That's a nice one. There was another question around, please advise where marketing research and insights sits in PNG. And I think you can probably take the ones about supplier diversity and the contact details in one. There's another one about, please share the link for your supplier database. Are there things that we do as suppliers that annoy your procurement team and what that affect our brand? So I'm going to stop there. There's a lot of thank yous. So great. Thank you very much, Mikal and Palisa. You want to just take those ones, Mikal, and then we can close out.
Great. I think let me start off from the last one. I think it was a question, or not sure if it was a comment. But if you're asking if there's things that annoy the procurement team, I'd say that no, there isn't. We do put ourselves in the supplier's shoes to understand that if we do get 3 mails from you in a week, that you really want the business or the service offering, and if we don't reply, then that's on us. And most of the time, unless it's during a very busy period, and for PNG, that's, I'd say, between May and August, because our financial year end is in June, we're very responsive on mails. It would be within a day, within the next day, but sometimes it aren't that responsive, and it does take a while to come back. So we do understand your frustration as well. I would think getting on to the next one, on the supplier database, we treat our suppliers' information very confidentially, and unfortunately, we can't share any of those details. We don't even share the names of the suppliers that we work with on big projects. The question on how do you be a supplier for P&G, I would say that one would be one of the most common questions we've been asked in the series of webinars, coaching, and trainings. That is, the process is it's all tied to a business need. If there's a business need that P&G sees, for example, I'd say one of the most common ones now is masks, PPEs, sanitizers, things like that. We will send out an RFQ or an RFP, a request for proposal, and we send it out to networks where we have supplier bases. So like We Connect, we will reach out to Gene to say, this is the item we need at the moment or service we need at the moment. Do you have suppliers that can currently offer that? And if so, please share their contact details with us. And we then reach out. If it's successful, we then register you onto the supplier database. The reason why we don't do this in advance is because if we do, then and don't have any transactions with you in a 6-month period or so, then it gets flagged by our central team and you get blocked for a certain period of time because there's no transactions going on with that account. So to avoid that, we register suppliers when we know we're going to use them instead of registering them and keeping them on the database. And then I think the last one that we had was, how do you understand your circle of influence, and is there a way to fast track that? That would be something that I would say is internal and on a personal level, whether you're looking at what kind of circle influence do you have as a company owner or director, and what kind of circle of influence you have on a personal level. It's very intuitive based on the type of person you are, the interactions you've had, what you've done, what you haven't done. There's no real way to fast track that. It's more of an internal understanding to say that, well, to know that I can influence my supplier, but I can't influence my customer's supplier. So it's very intuitive based on your own company standing and your own personal standing. I hope I answered those questions as you would have wished.
Great, thanks, Mikal. That was a really great hour of great information. Thank you again very much. I'd just like to say to those listening in, if you are not registered on the We Connect database, please go to the weconnectinternational.org website and register. We really want to have more women-owned businesses in our network. When people like Mikal ask us for information on women-owned businesses, we look on our database first. So please make sure you're on the database and we have your information. With that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today, and we'll see you in the next webinar. Thank you very much. Have a good day. Bye.